Welcome to Building Teams with Teams & Co., where we explore how leaders can empower their teams, achieve ambitious strategies, and deliver an exceptional customer experience. Views expressed by guests are their own and may not reflect the views of Teams & Co. Mention of particular products or services and participation of a guest does not imply an endorsement by Teams & Co. The information provided is for educational and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as professional advice.
Everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Building Teams with Teams & Co. Mike and I are super excited to welcome Jon Jones, co-founder and CEO of Anthroware, to this week's episode. Hey, Jon, how you doing?
Good. How's everybody?
Good. Jon, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Of course. Anytime.
So, Jon, what we like to start off with a little bit is, obviously, we've known each other for a couple of years, met through networking in the Asheville, North Carolina area. But why don't you give our listeners just a little bit of background about you, about Anthroware, just so we can kind of set our right foot off and make sure everybody knows a little bit more about you.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. I think every time, Tracy, you and I talk, I feel like I learn so much. So I'm very excited to be on your podcast and have listened to a few episodes. So I feel like I have a lot to live up to with the type of guests that you guys have. So a little bit about me and Anthroware. My background is it started out in hard science, and my first job out of grad school was a scientist, and I got really obsessed with computers actually because I was working in a corporate lab, and I realized that all the freedom I had in the academic world to experiment was all of a sudden very structured. And with a laptop, if you knew how to code, you could build everything you want. You could buy a lab for a couple of $1,000 and be super creative. And I think that my education and the background around science has really sort of shaped how we do things from a experimentation perspective at Anthroware. But that was really a pivotal moment for me, is just realizing that I could go buy a lab and build whatever I want with a computer. And so I quit that job to work for a big consulting company writing software to gain experience. And then very shortly after that, met my business partner there, and we started Anthroware because we just really wanted to build things, quote unquote, the right way, which is a super subjective kind of silly thing to have on your shoulder. But it is a driving force. And so yeah, fast forward, Anthroware was born. We very quickly invested in design and design thinking. And then, a couple years in, realized that we were talking ourselves out of a lot of business because we didn't believe in, it's like, hey, this, have you really thought this through? You're going to spend a lot of money here, and, it's very hard to see return. And kind of the light bulb coming on then that we were doing very strategic type consulting around the company's roadmap. And, they're trying to solve a problem where they know they have a pain point, and they might have even valued it. I'm bleeding out on the floor. I need a tourniquet and morphine, but they don't know how to solve the problem. And so when we started thinking about it that way, the firm really changed into this very full cycle, very, very comprehensive product studio where, we are pressure testing ideas. We are doing like almost commercialization experimentation, for new products in the pre-market. We're designing and building apps and platforms for, healthcare and insurance and, banking and property tech and bees. We're building an app for bees.
Cool.
And beekeepers. So we're designing and building things. And then now we're also, going, to market with them and developing full on go-to-market strategies. And then really the really exciting thing with that is we're using the same research institution that we use to build the products well to achieve product market fit. And now once these products are in the market, either within a company, as a B2B type solution, or, a direct to consumer type solution, we've got a feedback loop where we're understanding like, well, hey, if we built this feature, we would open up this much more market. Or, maybe your sales process stinks and, or your onboarding process stinks and you have poor lifetime value, or you could increase your win rate. So we're very, scientific method, run an experiment, design thinking, human-centered design focused, full spectrum product studio now. So it's been kind of a fun journey over the last 8 years.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you do a really good job of kind of meeting the customer. And one of the things that struck me about our first conversation, and I'll get your saying incorrect, so I'll kind of put it in broad terms for our audience, but one of the things that I really was impressed by was a little bit of what you were just alluding to, which is you and the team at Anthroware don't just build standard kind of solutions, right? You don't have this cookie cutter approach that says, oh, everybody needs an app or everybody needs X or Y. What you really try to do is solve that problem and up their game, so to speak, and provide that extra level of value. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that with our customers. One of the things we often speak about is knowing your customer, knowing the value you're going to provide to your customer. And that's a big pillar for us, and it's where everything starts. So that really resonates with us. And we'd just love to hear you speak more about how you manage those conversations and how you help to deliver the most possible value, not just like a set solution.
That's a really great question. I'll do my best because it is something we deeply care about. And I think business people can get real jargony too. And I think removing some of that jargon is actually super helpful to meeting people where they are. Because as a professional services firm, when we get hired, there is some kind of deficiency. There is an outcome that our partner wants. They have that problem, and it's a big problem. If they just have a vitamin problem, if they, the vitamin, and
it's like the vitamin versus Advil
versus morphine. Yeah. So I say morphine, but if you run out of vitamins one night, are you going to stop brushing your teeth, run out right then and go buy more vitamins? No, So if it's a big enough problem, and it's an active problem, then the conversations that we have are around understanding the cost of doing nothing, which is a competitor that I think a lot of professional services firms don't understand well enough. They'll lose to just the client not doing anything, or the potential client. So you have to value the problem and the opportunity, which are different. There are a lot of quote unquote digital transformation projects that fix the risks but don't address the opportunity. And I could talk about that more in a minute. But it's really about understanding, hey, is this an active problem, or is it a passive problem where it's not a big enough deal for them to solve it? Is it a latent problem where I just told you something you didn't know, and now all of a sudden you're educated to this problem that you have, and now you want to fix it? Or is it a problem where you can totally envision the solution and you just need somebody to execute it, which is not really a design problem. It's more like pouring concrete. And so we have to determine like what type of problem it is and whether or not they even value what we do, because you're not a good partner to everybody. It has to be a outcome that they want. You have the capacity to do it, and they have a deficiency that you fit in like a key. And so, a lot of times when we're looking at partners, if they've already invested in UX designers in-house, they're already paying salaries, that kind of thing, then a lot of that education for what we do and why they would value us is already done. But they've got a time crunch, or they're they're used to doing sort of incremental innovation, and they do that really well, but they're facing some sort of big step up, and they need some extra help or some outside perspective or something like that. I mean, really, professional services, the best you can do is say, like, this is the process we believe in. This is why we think it's good. This is what we think you're dealing with. And and this is how we do it, and they can buy it or not. There's really no hard sell because, I always say professional services are bought, not sold. I heard that from a mentor a long time ago, and it's really stuck with me. You either fit or you don't. So I think looking for those clients that are already investing in trying to solve some of those issues and just maybe need some help it moves that conversation along a lot faster. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. It looks like Mike has a question, so I'm holding for him.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to ask. It sounds like the right fit for you, Jon, oftentimes is those firms that aren't just looking for an extra set of hands, but are looking for somebody to help them think through maybe a more disruptive innovation, or to diagnose a problem they might not even know that they have, or they're aware that something's wrong, but they're not sure what exactly it is. Is that part of the exploration as you're finding the right fit for partners, where you will filter some out on your end?
Yeah, I think everybody should be filtering out where you're not a good fit. And we get hired at the end of the day because we de-risk the projects. Hiring an outside consultancy that's done this, 50 times, it de-risks the project. So kind of back to that pouring concrete example, by the time you get to pouring concrete, like you're pouring footers for a house, it would be foolish to go just start pouring concrete. A lot of work has been done before you get there. Mm-hmm. And so the solution has been designed, like, decoupling design from just moving pixels to make a screen look beautiful. You're designing a solution when you're building the blueprint for the house, or deciding even how many rooms it needs. Does it need a garage? Where is that all laid out? You don't start building a house without a design. So when the concrete's being poured, you can put extreme parameters around that. Like, that is a requirement now that you can write. They're going to be placed like this. They're going to be this deep. You're going to pour exactly this much concrete. It's going to take exactly this much time to let it set. And the outcome is fixed. Whether or not you accomplished it or not is easy to understand. When you know that, hey, I need a house and I've got this weird, funky piece of land, and I know that I need a house, but I don't know what it looks like yet, you call an architect. You don't just start pouring concrete.
Yeah.
And so if we come across a client that just wants to pour concrete, then if we push them through our entire process, which is, we look for long-term partners, right? So as I'm sure you do as well. So it's just as much about them deciding whether or not we fit their needs, and that they would want to work with us for months or years, as it is us saying, hey, are these people that would value us, that we trust, that we want to hang out with and be with for months or years. And if we push that partner through that just needs a concrete pour all the way to the end of our sales process, they won't buy us anyway. Because they're going to be more price sensitive, not outcome based, because they already have the outcome that they need. They just need somebody to execute on it. So, I think just knowing who you are as a firm, what makes your team tick, what gets them excited, it really helps sort of give you focus with where you are the best team player with a partner. Because when you find that out, then the relationship you have is different. It's better. They trust you. You are a trusted guide, right? A problem comes up, and it will, and you're like, how might we, together? I'm never going to be the expert in your business. It's your business. I'm the expert in these other things. So how do we figure it out together? And that's so much healthier for everybody involved. Our team, loves that so much more. Our partners, our longest term partners, we have that kind of relationship. And we don't even have to talk about what the other type of relationship work looks like, right? Like, everybody's been there, and it sucks. So I think the more you know about yourself and where you are a good team player, the better it is for everybody.
I think it's also a good lesson for all of our listeners, right? We hear this often from, we work with organizations that are trying to scale and grow their business. And sometimes the tendency there is to try to do it all, right? You're trying to boil the ocean. You're trying to offer everything to everybody. And that doesn't really allow you to provide the best quality to the people who you can deliver the best quality to, right? And so we have a similar situation at Teams & Co., right? We work from, figuring out what the customer value is, helping an organization set that strategy, like how do we solve this challenge, and then working with their teams to implement it. But if somebody came to us and said, hey, we don't want to do all three, we want to do just this one little piece, that's much more difficult because it's difficult on our team. It's also difficult on their team because, to your point, you're kind of putting them through a process where maybe they're not sure of it and they don't get as much value. So in those situations, we find it's really helpful to recommend them to somebody else, right? So if somebody came to us and said, hey, we need a new website, we don't build websites, right? So we'd say, oh, we don't do that, but we know this great firm that does, much better fit. And then the customer's happy, right? We're still giving them value. We're giving them a different kind of value, which is, referring them. But that totally resonates with me. It's a great way to make sure that you're working together. And the thing I love about it, which is the other question I want to hear from you, because we often have to do this as well, right? We're a professional services firm, is you become part of the team, right? You're not actually part of the company, but you're part of the team and you're now delivering together. That's how we work. We implement with our partners, our clients. And so how do you manage that, right? We get this question a lot from folks, which is like, oh, I'm hiring a firm or I'm part of a firm. How do I help build myself into their team? How do we align goals? So what does that look like at Anthroware, and how do you manage that kind of internal, external team setup?
That's another really great question. And we're doing a book club right now. We're going through one of Mike Montera's books, and he has a quote in there. I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like a vendor is the person that refills snacks in your break room, and what you want as a partner. And I think when it's a huge part of that is how you sell into that situation from the get-go. How you are treated is how you show up in the room. How you treat them and how you expect to be treated is the same. It's golden rule stuff. So, on the one hand, there's sort of a set of guidelines that we follow from a sales process that are practical and pragmatic. How important is, and this doesn't work for everybody, this works for us. How important is this project in the organization is one of our questions. If it's one of the top 3 problems that the organization is facing and the CEO cares about it, or maybe even the board cares about it, we're not going to have any stakeholders swoop in that we didn't know about and undermine things, which is never the intention, but I think that language probably works. If it's a top 3 problem for the organization, we're being hired as at a strategic level anyway. What we run into more is when because we do a lot of stuff. I don't think we're trying to boil the ocean, but that was one of the concerns when we said, hey, are we really going to add marketing? And the reason why we did is because most of the reason why we're good at marketing is because we built this amazing research engine inside the company, which is honestly what drives our business model consulting. It's what drives our design, and it drives our marketing and our feedback loop right back to product. So it wasn't for us, it was something we could be excellent at that allowed us to control kind of that full cycle, or be a game time threat for our partners in that full cycle. And it like makes sense. But back to my point, if we get hired in to build an app, the biggest danger that we face is getting pigeonholed as the app developer. So like my recommendation, if there are any like professional services firms listening to this, one thing to think about is your level of call into the organization. Like, who are you talking to? If you're talking to a, mid-level director and you get hired to build an app, in our case, and then that same client has a really amazing opportunity that we would be perfect for, that's different or more strategic somewhere, then you might be pigeonholed as the app guy. If your call-in is to the C-suite and they know you have all these capabilities, but you're able to kind of crack that bundle a little bit and say, okay, well, yeah, we can help, we can fit in right here. And part of your account plan is that we're actually going to build a roadmap for this that's at a strategic level, that so we can understand your company's goals. So you're communicating at a much different, level depending on who you talk to. And for us, the call-in has to be really high. And then that's what sort of de-risks that situation around sort of how they value us and how they view us, how we become a trusted guide versus just a vendor. But then it's consistency in the team. I mean, you don't switch your team a lot. You give them dedicated resources, and the reason why that works is because for us, we care about mission alignment. If there's something in your mission or some aspect of the problem that you're solving that is especially endearing to us, then our team gets excited about that. And we're lucky enough to have some partners where we get really, really excited about what they're doing. And it feels just like doing anything else. Working with them feels like working for ourselves. So it's really cool.
Jon, how did you go through the process of understanding that distinctly your role, the role of Anthroware? It sounds like there's a lot of introspection that went into discerning, are we a vendor or are we a strategic guide? We want to work with the C-suite on a top 3 strategic problem. And in fact, we view an engagement where we may just be an execution partner. That's not really our sweet spot, but it is for a lot of firms. So how did you guys go through the process of understanding this is who we are, this is our identity, and this is how we want to work with our partners?
Well, so this is 8 years old. A lot of thinking has gone into this. 8 years from now, I'll probably give a completely different answer. We might be a completely different firm.
Okay.
And I think that entrepreneurs get really hung up on what they want, just like everybody, versus what the market is asking for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, the world appears to be asking for Anthroware to be a wisdom firm. And I think in the world of professional services, there's really 3 buckets that I've heard in my circles. And there's like an intellect firm where it's a bunch of PhDs in a room that are solving problems that nobody's ever solved. We're not that. There's a wisdom firm where you're getting asked for case studies quite often. Maybe you're talking to references. How have you helped other people in the past? And you're getting hired because you've been there, done that. And then there's like a method firm where they, intellect and wisdom firms, you're doing a lot of critical thinking. You're not getting hired to produce a data point. You're getting hired to produce insight.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting hired for the critical thinking. With a method firm, and there's nothing wrong with any of these types of firms. With a method firm, you're generally very price sensitive, and you're able to hire, instead of hiring a bunch of seniors, at a wisdom firm, you've got this process or method in place that allows you to hire junior level people and train them correctly, and then be very price competitive in sort of a more commoditized manner. So when there's a lot of signs that, from our history that points to where we want to go and where projects that we're going to find turn frustrating, or clients that we thought would be a great idea to take on and they weren't. Not that they're a bad client, but it's just there's a mismatch in what we've been talking about, right? And when back to the pouring concrete versus architect thing, there are plenty of people that love pouring concrete, and it's an awesome job. And so that's where I think a lot of those method firms come in. But where, like, the way that we talk about product, people are expecting us to raise our hand and push back and not just be yes people, but to really help form the solution. So I would say that, like, the most concise answer I would give is just, like, based on the type of firms that, that need us, they expect us to be a wisdom firm, not a method firm.
Yeah.
And that has just kind of hard fought lessons from what works and what doesn't. And now having that framework in my mind and that clarity, it's like, well, obviously we're not a method firm. Why would we take on that job? They need somebody that can just execute on what they want. They've already got a clear vision for what the solution looks like, and it's probably fine. They don't need our help. And if we ask too many questions and we push back too much, it's the opposite effect of what we want. So it just doesn't work as well.
Well, it sounds like to me, Jon, the thing that's really resonating with me and that I keep coming back to as you speak through that is, there's a lot of product companies out there that actually make a tangible product, right? So Anthroware, Teams & Co., we're more service kind of oriented firms, right? We provide a service. Obviously, at the end of the day, you and your firm actually help develop a product as well. But that process is always really iterative for organizations, right? You hear a lot about innovation and roadmaps and, product innovation and product iteration and constantly improving your product. What I love about what you're talking about with Anthroware is you all are doing that with your service, right? So maybe when you started 8 years ago, you had a certain expectation, and then you did something and you learned, and then you met with another client and you learned, and you're constantly kind of iterating and innovating within your model to say, hey, yeah, sometimes those things didn't match up, right? We've all been there. We've bought something at a store where we're like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. Or you get pleasantly surprised and you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. That's awesome. But it happens to all of us, right? But with the services, it is a longer term relationship. So you kind of have to figure those things out. And I just love hearing you speak about it because it sounds like you and the team are being very diligent around, okay, let's take our learnings, let's take our research and keep picking those clients that are closer and closer to where we provide the most value. And that just seems like it'd be really fun for you and your team because you're working on super exciting projects that align with your mission, align with their mission and strategy. And it seems like it'd be a really engaging environment when you're in one of those rooms.
I'm lucky enough to work with a bunch of people that deeply care. They're rigorous in their work, and we all constantly try to get better. And that is the only environment that I want to work in. So it is iterative, and I hope it always is.
Yeah,
I don't want to have it all figured out.
No, I was struck by a really similar thing, and we talk a lot about learning from our customers and understanding, well, what sort of problems do different people need solved? And that's true whether it's a direct-to-consumer product company, whether it's a services company, whoever our organizations are serving, we need to understand our customers. The other thing it sounds like you've got a great grasp of, Jon, and your team does, is a strong understanding of who you are and what your core internal capabilities are. And so you, based on that degree of introspection, and I'm sure your own conversations that you guys have had on what's our strategy, what's our strategic plan, who do we want to serve, and how do we get there, you're able to find customers whose needs align really well with your internal capabilities. So that's something else that I'd layer in there, because Tracy, you and I talk so much on this podcast and other forums about learning about your customers. And yeah. I'd love to dig in a little bit, Jon, on the methods that you guys use to gain those understandings about your own team.
About our own team. Yeah, I mean, so I think probably the most unexpected answer I could give is through suffering. And, you really learn the most when you're going through a pruning stage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you couple that with a couple of growth spurts, it's all cyclical, right? Business, it's never a straight line going up and to the right. So you learn a lot. You learn the most at an individual level and probably at a team level going through suffering, and then you change the most going through a growth spurt. And every time you get twice as refined in your thinking, you find that the stuff that was working before is not working anymore. And so you go, hey, you have to change things. And when you undergo change, that's when you realize whether or not the company's outgrowing people, or God forbid, it's the other way around, right? Like your people are outgrowing your company. Well, not God forbid. I'm like the people that have left Anthroware for the last 8 years are all very successful, amazing people. So, being a step on that journey is a privilege as an employer. But that's when those splits tend to happen, is when either you're changing things with your vision or your company or your processes or where you're headed that people don't agree with, or they, it wasn't the same company that they wanted to work for 5 years ago or whatever. So I think that you learn the most, and you tune in to sort of the core values of the people that you want to be around and work well in your environment when you go through periods of growth and suffering. And I'm actually sort of a little bit triggered by the culture fit phrase, because we're a product company. I don't want to hire a bunch of people that think exactly like I do. Mm-hmm. So just hiring for direct culture fit, it would just be hiring a bunch of people that think like we already think. And so we've internally kind of changed that narrative to the core values fit. And so we've got a few things that are kind of boundary conditions. If you're not striving to be a very humble person, you're going to clash with our team and likely our partners, because if you have to be the smartest person in the room, we're all going to hate working with you. So we know that hiring people that have a sense of humility is really, really important. And there's plenty of others, but that type of clarity has come from sort of the waxing and waning of the business, and how those pressures either, cause leadership decisions to be made, and that people don't like, or they love. And then also just those personal growth periods of going through suffering.
Yeah, and I think those parts are the parts none of us want to go through, right? Like there's, those parts where we're all kind of, in that kind of common struggle. But it sounds like you and your team do a good job of learning from it and trying to decrease those friction points going ahead, right? So you go through a period where, hey, this isn't ideal. It's been kind of tough. But now we're going to learn from that and take those friction points out of the way. So maybe the next time we don't go through those. We might go through some more, right? To your point, businesses up and down, and there might be a whole new set of challenges. But that's what we talk to teams about a lot, right? You want to be agile in the way of not the development kind of term agile, but as a team, you want to be able to have that resilience to respond and say, hey, okay, we've been through a tough time together before. This might not look exactly like that, but we got through it once and we can get through it again. And how do we do that together versus every person for themselves? And I just, I need to get myself kind of taken care of versus the team being taken care of. And
you have to be really open to see the people that in those moments are ready and chomping at the bit to sort of rise above their current position.
Yeah.
And we've always seen that in times of, kind of transition, but you have to give that space.
Yeah.
So, it's a painful thing. It's hard to talk about, but every business goes through it. and you come out better.
Now, it's a real conversation, and I think it's questions we get often too, right? Obviously, everybody would always love business to be smooth sailing and a perfect picture of entrepreneurship, like everything is successful all the time. But I think true leaders, to your point, real leaders kind of step up in those times where the team is struggling. And they say, hey, how do I help, even if I'm not the formal manager of this team, how can I be an individual leader and help us all kind of get through this? What can I do to improve our collective process? Where can I step up or where can I step back, right? To your point, there's sometimes that as a leader, you have to be like, okay, I have to kind of step back a little bit and lead from behind to allow my team to kind of, coalesce in the ways that they need to and kind of take ownership around these things. And I think it's a valuable lesson for leaders in terms of, okay, hopefully those struggle points will be short, but preparing the team for them and having a common approach and a common plan is really valuable and important because, it allows you to enjoy the success a little bit more, right? You're like, oh, okay, we all got through this thing together. It's kind of you'll laugh at this, and I'll do this shout out for Jeff Kaplan, who was on the show before, which obviously I know you're a good friend of Jeff's and know him, but he was talking about like the success of a team is so much more fulfilling, right? It's like that whole like mosh pit on the World Series, like everybody's running and you were all running and celebrating together because you did have some lows, right? There were some games you lost and it was a hard, long season and you had this collective kind of, so to speak, battle together. And now you've overcome that and you've won. And that's what we love about teams too, right? Individual wins are fun. Those team wins, I mean, we think you can't beat them.
It feels good. Yeah. And what we're getting now is this sort of underdog mentality at Anthroware, where, joining the team now is akin to, jumping on board the pirate ship and sailing it into the yacht club. And there's some rallying points too, just on the way up, right? Like, our clients are getting more and more sophisticated, and the type of work we're being asked to do is more and more in line with what we were talking about earlier. And, what makes, it's all a journey. It doesn't just start at one point. It's like, oh, this is I'm just going to say this now. And because I said it on Tracy's podcast, now all of our clients are perfect. It doesn't work that way. It's a journey.
That's what happens on the Teams & Co podcast. If you say it, it totally comes true. That's what we like to believe.
That's why I'm here. I'm going to hang up and just sit beside my phone and wait for it to start ringing. But yeah, I mean, it's so important to know where you're going, and realize that it's aspirational at the same time, because it's frustrating to hear me talk all the time about, our ICP or where we're, our goals and where we're headed. And then if that's not reflected by reality 100% and you don't have the right attitude about it, it's like, well, then why did we take this client? It's like, well, that client slipped through. We tried, we're not going to get them all. But that lighthouse, that sort of aspirational that you never actually get to because you hit the rocks, right? Knowing where you're going and being able to make sure that you're comparing your actions to that. And, that's what gives you sort of a litmus with the team to say, hey, we're imperfect. You're following a bunch of imperfect leaders. We're making mistakes. We're doing the best we can to serve you and listen. And this is where we think we're going. And here's how these decisions align with that. And you've got to just sort of lay it all out there, because we're, a very small company. There's no need for anything but transparency. So there's, we talk about where this is going a lot, and just, we're doing a better job sort of allowing for the types of, conversations that are just really meaningful to people. But I think that's maybe advice that I would give myself 5 years ago, is to listen more to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. How do you set that lighthouse when you set the strategic direction for the firm? How do you guys do that? Is that a leadership decision? Is that do you engage different team members in that conversation?
It's one of those things where it's a lot easier to poke at something if you've got a picture to start with, right? Like if you have a starting place already defined, it's easier to see issues with it or see things to get excited about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll generally throw something out on paper, and then we talk about it as a leadership team, and then we share with the team and have a feedback session around that. And that goes with financial goals. It goes with any kind of cultural goals we have, or wealth building within the team.
Mm-hmm.
Anything like that. We actually have a 5-step process that we go through with our clients when it comes to building like a winning product roadmap. And we generally drink our own Kool-Aid with that. We're looking at the risks and opportunities. We're, prioritizing things. We're going through a lot of the same activities that we go through with our clients, kind of minus the discovery phase, because we kind of know that part already. But yeah, I think it's something that we revisit yearly, and along with an analysis of what's working, what's not working, what's missing from a leadership team. And then we actually set, like, one of the things that COVID did is it forced me to learn some online collaboration tools like I'd never learned them before.
Yeah. And
I was able to set up some mural boards so our whole team could participate in the same exercise we did as a leadership team. And so, the leadership team is ultimately responsible for carrying the stuff out. But the voice of the team is most certainly heard there. But that, when you talk about it's doing it for us is easy, I would say, because we have really close collaborative stakeholders, and when it comes to goals, we're pretty aligned. It's amazing how aligned we are with the high level stuff. How we get there is where we argue and fight and stuff, but it's healthy, the healthy kind. One of the things we did 2019, kind of late 2019, maybe early 2019. I'm not real sure. We did this in the past. That's all that matters.
We're all on the same timeline, Jon. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Last year,
I hate when
really
people say
happened.
I'm missing a year, though. Like, that year definitely happened, and it was brutal. But we didn't miss it. But anyway, we're doing a sort of a refresh on our branding, which we're undergoing again now because of some things that are shifting. Our ICP is shifting a little bit, and we opened up a lot of exercises to the whole team, because branding is not really saying, hey, we're going to be that. That sounds good. I want to be that. It's much more about interpreting who you already are and explaining that very clearly to your ideal customer. And one of those exercises, we asked the team what Anthroware looks like in a year, or 3 years, or 5 years. That silly sort of like that classic HR, where do you want to be in 5 years? Before we hire you. I hate that question. But we asked that, and the interesting thing was I'd written down where I thought we were going to be in terms of like people, revenue, culture, like that kind of stuff. And when the team responded, their dream for what Anthroware could be was bigger than my own. And it blew me away. That's awesome. And we're currently doing a study right now where I'm asking this question to our team members, where I say, like, okay, tough year, tough little bit. What does Anthroware look like in 2 or 3 years where your friends are jealous that you work here, and that being here was the best career move of your life? And we're getting responses that are, some of them are very practical. I want to be able to work remotely from another country for 6 months out of the year. It's just like a very black and white thing, which is okay, by the way. Person that asked that's fine. But some of them are very sort of hard to put your finger on, but really, really important, and more about the feel of the place. And we're at a, if you think about it right, like we can build the company and culture that people really want to work at, and it's up to us to do it. And it's not just up to leadership. It's up to the leadership has to open up to letting the whole team kind of really be a part of that. So that's been a really interesting survey as well, just to kind of get a pulse for that. And it helps, like that's obviously goes into setting our goals as a firm where we want to be. So,
Jon, I think it's I love that you're answering questions on here. This is like the Q&A live with your team around the responses to the survey questions. So I feel like we're real time helping build a team here. This is great. But I think also what strikes me is there's a lot of organizations, and we hear this a lot, is like how do we adjust? You know, we've all had a really hard year and a half now. You know, our businesses have, you know, some businesses have grown quite quickly in that year and a half because just based on the changing dynamics, things, you know, needed to, you know, ramp up for them. Other businesses have obviously struggled and maybe their business has slowed down or they've had to lay people off. But overall, I think all businesses are kind of taking a step right now to say, okay, what's the next thing for us, right? Like, how do we build the next thing? How do we make sure we're successful in the future? You know, it sounds like you all at Anthroware are doing a lot of research and kind of branding and kind of making sure you know who you are and how that comes to life in the world. But what are some of the other ways that you're kind of changing the way you think about the future, right? We hear a lot of organizations saying, I'm no longer ever making a 5-year strategic plan ever again. Like 5 years is too long. I'm going to be going shorter, right? But we hear different things from different businesses. So are there things that you used to do as an organization and as a leader to say, hey, I think this is the best way to set our organization up for success? Now knowing what you know and kind of all the agility we've all had to build in the last year and a half, are there new things that Anthroware is just kind of trying to put into practice to be more successful and more agile as you approach the future?
Well, to back up for a minute, a 5-year strategic plan has been too long for a long time. Just throwing that out there. Business and the world moves faster than 5-year increments. So, I think that over the past like 18 months, we have definitely been in kind of attack mode. Like this is an opportunity. We don't want to go out and back into the cave and shrink away. We want to go really take advantage of the opportunity as we can. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a while. And, you know, especially, you know, you've got the big consulting firms like KPMG and BCG and Bain on massive hiring sprees. You've got $1.5 trillion in private equity. You've got 2 huge influxes of cash. So we're having an inflation conversation, obviously. But where's that money going to be spent? Our current administration is probably going to do, something else important in one way or another around our environment or the economy that's going to stimulate a lot of entrepreneurial activity. I mean, like if you're not thinking of this as an opportunity, then I would suggest you call Tracy or call me and we'll talk you into it. It is an opportunity right now. So Anthroware, I think, if anything else, is just very bullish about that. I think it would be a little bit silly to say that our goals have completely changed. That would mean that we've been bad at setting goals. You know, before the pandemic happened, we were still right on the cusp of a recession. We were absolutely due for one. We still are. And so those are the type of things that you need to be thinking about as a business owner anyway. So I don't think our plans have dramatically changed. But I do think that we learned a lot. We had an accelerated learning period over the past 18 months. The other thing I think is probably going to be on the front of everybody's mind is how personal work is. And it was personal before. Like, that hasn't changed either. But our resiliency tank is pretty low right now. I mean, it's going to take a while for that to build back up, even though in the United States, at least, the pressure's off quite a bit from a pandemic standpoint. We're kind of on the other side of that as far as, how most places are operating. But that we have been depleted from a resiliency standpoint so much that it adds a lot of stress to everything else. And employee care, team care, we're accelerating different benefits and stuff that we're providing, in an expanded way, because that is going to continue to be very, very important. I'm interested in your perspective on sort of the job market and obviously, like, a lot of companies are realizing that they can trust people to work remote just fine, which is so funny to me. You didn't know that before? Yeah. Did you not trust your people? But it is changing things, and our market is very unstable right now because it's like normalizing towards the larger market in terms of like salaries and stuff like that, instead of the other way around, which is a little bit weird. So I think there's a lot of turmoil, and I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but at some level, I think if you have a good plan, you're just going to plug away and do the activities that work for you and try to get better at them.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that there's been a lot of. I really love what you're saying about the team. I think, we always focus on teams, and I think the organizations that are going to be successful are recognizing, hey, the way that we were doing it before may not have been, what we're doing now, right? But I think there's new expectations from people. This has been an incredibly difficult 18 months. To your point, it's still incredibly difficult in a lot of places around the world. And I think organizations recognizing that, trying to support their teams in a way that, obviously businesses, need people to work. But to your point, I was always very surprised. I've worked from home from basically the beginning of my career. I started off my career as a sales rep in a territory. And so I never worked at headquarters. And so this whole idea that team members can't be productive if they're not directly in an office with each other is a very foreign concept to me. I realize my career may be unique in that I've mostly worked outside of a headquarters. There's only been a few times in my career I've worked at a headquarters. But I do think that there's a real recognition by organizations that they need to be able to empower their teams and give them the resources to be successful no matter where they're working, right? And so that for us is a huge opportunity in terms of being able to help organizations build those processes, build those resources. But I think also, to your point, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of, growing businesses doing is shifting their tact. Maybe to your point, maybe they're not doing the exact same thing they said they were going to be doing, but they are able to say, hey, a customer need has changed in this way, and we're going to adjust to that, and we're going to, be able to serve our customers even better. And you've seen this in really obvious ways in the last 18 months, right? Curbside, pickups, a lot more delivery services. But you've also seen it in nuanced ways where people are maybe building in features to products or tech products that they have to make those things easier for people. And so I think that we're going to continue to see that shift where people first, whether it's from an employee standpoint and a team standpoint or from a product standpoint, has become a really big focus. Not that it wasn't before, but I think it, like, people first and customer first is taking on a whole new meaning given the pressures that we've all experienced this year. So I'm intrigued to see kind of how we all come together. But that's the thing that I've been most, maybe not surprised isn't the word, but pleasantly, I guess I'll say pleasantly surprised just because I'm lacking a better term. I think the ability for organizations to come together to innovate in a critical time for our society as a global community is really impressive to me, right? Whether it's kind of at the, again, the obvious level of kind of healthcare companies and pharmaceutical companies working together to create these vaccines very quickly, or even at an organizational level below that or in different industries, just people really working together to say, hey, we've got some common challenges. And while we didn't used to work with these other organizations, it's really exciting. Like I hear more and more people saying they're referring customers to different clients or different providers, right? I think there's just this new level of collaboration between businesses to help everybody kind of get to the next level that I'm super excited about. And I'm really intrigued about where it goes. So I think that's going to be something we continue to see, a lot more partnerships, a lot more co-innovations. And so I'm looking forward to 2021 to see how that plays out. But I'll let Mike add his thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think a lot of this conversation filters back to a couple of things, Jon, that you had mentioned earlier. One is having values alignment with the people that you bring onto your team. So the fact that it's a surprise for so many organizations that they can trust their people, it's like, I'm surprised that you're surprised, right? Like that should have been something that you're hiring for people that have enough alignment from a values perspective to say, yes, we can trust this person to get the job done regardless. They don't need a babysitter. They're an adult. They don't need their boss looking over their shoulder. I'm surprised that you're surprised. You'd think that you have some filters in a hiring process to filter those people out. And then another thing that jumped out to me was the conversation on humility earlier. And I've got Anthroware's site up on my other screen, and I'm seeing the cycle through on the "we believe" statements. And I think that those are really powerful, and particularly the humility to sort of infiltrate a lot of ways. Jon, you were speaking earlier about seeking the feedback of employees in understanding, like, what is our strategic direction, and not giving them a totally blank target, providing some direction there, but then having the humility as a leadership team to listen to the feedback of your team, I think is really cool. Having the humility, Tracy, to some of the points that you're making, to respond to the market in different ways and say, I'm not always right. My view of the world and where I think we need to go, that can change if it needs to, based on, the market, based on what we're hearing from customers. And Jon, I know that you've invested, and Anthroware's invested tremendously in this big research division or research tool. So that wasn't a direct correlation to what we were talking about before. I'm just super interested and curious to hear what, more about that and sort of your guys' differentiator as you look at what enables you to be the more strategic partner as opposed to execution pair of hands.
I love that question. I'm super passionate about it, so I'll try to keep it down.
No, don't keep it down. Keep it up.
I'll be the one screaming into the podcast. So, yeah, I think there's a couple of dots to connect here when you're talking about the market, and you're talking about change, and then you're talking about research, because your customers didn't just change their behavior due to the pandemic that we've just been through and are kind of on the tail end of. They didn't just like snap back to who they were before. They've likely changed forever. And so many businesses are guessing at who those customers are now. They don't know them anymore. It's insane. And so when you have an organization any organization that's focused on human-centered design, anthropology is in the name of our company for a reason. You're studying people to figure out what really moves the needle for that individual. And we call this bottom-up value creation. And if you solve the problem for that individual, And then number one, are they going to buy it? Number two, did they use it as expected? And number three, does it have the intended outcome? That is product market fit demystified. You can put metrics on it. It is not magic, pulling a cat out of a hat or whatever. It is literally something you can measure. And so our research function that I talk about at Anthroware is a cross between like we're using user experience researchers and designers to uncover business outcomes and business use cases. So when we go into a project, or if we're doing this ourselves, there's an element of research that could be a survey, which is what a lot of people think of. And then there's an element of it where it's just really deep one-on-one insights. Mm-hmm. So whether this is a win-loss study, which we're doing one of those for a big company in the sales enablement space right now, or it's a B2B application where, you're selling to a buyer, but the buyer isn't the person that has to use the software. So like literally you could buy a piece of software or build a piece of software and meet the needs of the organization perfectly. But if you're not meeting the needs of the individuals that have to use it, they're going to use spreadsheets or whatever other workaround they can to be outside of the system. And guess what? All that efficiency gain that you paid for goes out the window. Mm-hmm. And all these projects are tied to direct line tied to some outcome for our customers, our partners. So in the case of a digital transformation project, maybe it's capacity. Maybe I've got a low margin, high volume business, and it takes a lot of headcount, and I have all these inefficient processes. They don't have to be paper. Like the whole digital transformation to get rid of your paper processes, that was 10 years ago. What we're dealing with now is the crappy digital transformation projects that happen then that are just digitizing a process. We're not researching what is the job to be done. Forget about the way you've always done it. What's the outcome you're trying to get to? Which parts of that can we automate? Which parts of that can we make more human? For the past 30 years, we've been using software and computers just to automate things. We're realizing now, thank God, that there's aspects of this where we need to make things a little bit more human again. If my CRM it's totally smart enough to know, hey, tomorrow's it's not. I'm guessing tomorrow's not really your birthday, Tracy.
No, it's not. But that would have been awesome if it was.
But let's say it's tomorrow's Tracy's birthday, and my CRM is going to automatically send out a birthday message. We've got great AI because it's 2021, and it can even sound like me. But if that happens automatically, and I don't know it's Tracy's birthday, and we get on this call, or I see her tomorrow or whatever, and she's like, "Thanks for the birthday message." That's a failure of technology. What we should have done is added friction into the system, not automated it, to alert me, "Hey, tomorrow's Tracy's birthday. I've made this great message. You can send it, or you can customize it, or you can call her, or whatever." But I need to know. So that's just one instance of sort of slowing that back down. So there are places in digital transformation processes where you can take huge chunks of work that should be done by a computer off of a human being's plate. And there's also places where you can humanize that experience and make it enjoyable. And if you do that, then they use it time and time again, then all of a sudden the same 50 people in that company can do 30% more work. I don't have to hire any more headcount. So I've increased my leverage ratio in that business by 30%. And that's pure profit. So when we're talking about even B2B projects, we think of them like a B2C product. Mm-hmm. I have to make this something that individual would buy. They'll buy it with their time, or, I might ask them to be a beta tester. I might ask them to write a review that I would publish. So I might be asking them to, transact their reputation or their time instead of money. But it is a transaction. And then that little microcycle, every time they're doing that value creating activity at the individual level, that goes into the next cycle, which is usually something like revenue or, cost savings. And then if you think about it from the geeky point of view, now that we live in like a data-driven society, if you're actually able to track people's activities at an individual level and report upwards, then you're able to group those data points together, connect the dots, and say, well, this is an insight. And then now when you're at the strategic level and you're saying, okay, where we want to make our lighthouse, just to wrap all this up, like, what's our 24-month roadmap like? Because nobody's going to do 5 years. That's silly. But what's our 24-month roadmap look like? And we say we have now like data and insights to create predictive models that actually inform at a strategic level where the company's going. So that bottom-up value creation is hardly ever done in practice because businesses sell to buyers, and they don't put enough emphasis on the consumer. So I would say go learn who your consumer is. If you don't know how to do that, there's a bunch of resources online. You can ping us, and I'll tell you how to do it. I mean, a lot of times it's overkill to hire an agency to do that. Lots of people can do it on their own. And there's times where it makes tons of sense too, but that shouldn't be a hurdle. Go learn who your users are, learn who your customers are again, because they've changed. And then, don't go invest a bunch of money without doing that learning first, because you'll likely waste it.
Yeah. Jon, it sounds a lot like there's a book that I think I've talked about on this podcast before. It's called, have you heard of the Challenger sale?
I'm aware of the Challenger sales model. Yeah.
What you described sounds really similar to that, where essentially the Challenger sales model says, if you're working with a client in a B2B space and you understand a problem that they have that they might not even know that they have, you do that by understanding deep insights about their business or their industry, and really importantly, who their end consumer is. And if you're able to explain to them, hey, you have this problem that you might not even know that you have, or that might be deeper or more negatively impactful than you realize, but then because you have that deep insight from the end consumer, you can also present a solution that solves that problem and is much more impactful. So it sounds to me like what you just said was similar to that framework.
Let me add to that a little bit because it's really helpful. So I would call that a latent problem. And we talked about problem types 30 minutes ago. But a latent problem is a problem you don't know that you have until I tell you. That's not as effective for a professional services firm as an active problem for obvious reasons. They know they have a problem, but they don't know how to fix it.
Yep.
But I would think of it like you're on the right track, and I would think of it more like, think of the scientific method, right? You run an experiment and there are no incorrect outcomes. Every outcome is a result. And so when you start a process where you have sort of a vaguely defined or even well-defined pain point, then you go explore that more. And when you talk to people, you're in what we call a divergent phase where you're going wide. There's no wrong answers. These people might internalize that pain point totally different than these people over here. You might find an even bigger pain point than you predicted. And you might have to rank those later to see what pains you want to fix, or it might cause a pivot. But you don't care. You don't care what the outcome is. You just want to run those experiments, get that learning, and there's no wrong answer. And then when you synthesize everything you've learned, you're going into a convergent stage, right? So now you're converging again, and you're going to put a fine point on that and say, now this is like, I understand my customer's pain point now, and this is what it is.
Yep. And
it's a period, not a question mark. And then you have to go through another divergent phase and say, well, what should the solution be? And this is like an ideation phase where, everybody's, brains are cranking, and you're thinking hard about all these different things that could be a solution, and they're all guesses. And the nice thing is, what what we've learned is, and this is like not even Anthroware. I mean, this is a play that we use at Anthroware, but I think that kind of the design thinking double diamond came from IDEO. So there's a lot of thought that's been put into these models. And once you've kind of gone wide again with all these different solutions, guess what? You go talk to your users again.
Mm-hmm.
And this time you present them not with a, hey, do you like it? But, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll run a selling experiment where we say, all right, Mike, this isn't ready yet. It's going to be ready in 3 months. If you pre-order it right now, then I'll give you a discount for the first 6 months in return for 1 hour of your time a quarter so that we can just check in and get product feedback. So I'm asking you to buy it right now. You're going to write me a check or give me cash or a card or something. You're going to think that you're giving me money right then. And I'm asking for a sale of your time and maybe even your reputation. Like I might ask you to, like, hey, if you love it, I'm going to put your name on my website, right? Kind of those currencies we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
So when you run a selling experiment, a lot of times people get to that point, companies get to that point, and they say, what do you like about this? What do you not like about this? And people will tell you, but they are not product designers. And if they don't think they're buying it, then there's a high likelihood they're going to give you sort of a counterfeit or, non-committal yes instead of a very committed yes.
Mm-hmm.
And when they hand you that money, for sure that is a real signal that that product is something that they will actually buy. So that type of learning in that second sort of converging phase where you're trying to make the rubber hit the road as fast as possible, we haven't written any code yet. This is all in a design phase. You can run 50 of these experiments really quickly. And then when you get to that point, you're like, okay, I know pretty much exactly what the pain point is. I've done all this research, and now from a brand standpoint, I know how to talk to Mike.
Yep.
So that when I say this phrase, Mike has an emotional response because he feels that pain point. And then I show him the solution and he's willing to buy it right now. Why don't we build that? And you've spent, in comparison to rolling out a product, 20% of the cost, 15. And then you have to go through and actually design the full product and build it and release it on that. But you have a so much better chance of success. So that design thinking and sort of that research model to get at that information in a way that you can then present and stand behind your recommendations with real reasons that are not because one of our consultants is so smart. It's because we've talked to all your customers, all the people that are going to be using this, and they would actually buy it. It's a much more powerful tool for stakeholder alignment on what is going into a scope. And then, beyond that, you're actually now it's building it. Now you're pouring concrete more than you were before, and that engagement, changes a little bit in its nature. But that, and
I love
it was a great question.
Yeah, and I love the human-centered component there, right? Is the way that insights are developed is through human interactions with real people where you can understand and diagnose real pain points in a way that's not artificial. Putting them in that real test sale environment is not just, hey, we all have that tendency to want to tell people what we think they want to hear, and forcing somebody to put their money where their mouth is literally and say, okay, write me a check, or I'm going to need to put your reputation. I love how you phrase that the reputational value is really testing that before you write a line of code. So So I think one of the other core messages there that totally resonates is don't overinvest in infrastructure before you have a really good understanding of the deep or visceral emotional pain point of the end consumer. And if you can understand that, okay, holy cow, now we're cooking with gas. And to your point, consumers' pain points and their views of the world have changed. They change rapidly. They certainly changed in a world where, in the past 18 months or whatever, we've all been stuck inside a lot more. So that need for human-centered pain point discovery is so needed now. So I don't have anything more. I was just echoing the points that you said. Emphatically.
No, this has been great. I think that we could probably chat with you, Jon, for about 6 more hours if you let us. But I realize that we're at our time. So I do want to make sure before we cut off that we tell our listeners how they can get in touch with Anthroware. So maybe you could tell us where people can find you on social media or on the web, and then we can share that also in the show notes so people have an actual written reference to it.
Yeah, I mean, anthroware.com, and make sure you type in WARE. The other way you spell it is a totally different website that it's not human-centered design. But that's the easiest way. Contact form there. I'm on LinkedIn, and if you reference that you heard this or that you know me somehow, I'm generally really good about wanting to connect and talk to people. Those are the two best places to get us.
Awesome. Well, we will put all of those links in our show notes so folks can find it. You don't have to worry about how you type Anthroware. We'll make sure it's in there. We'll also put those links in our social media posts. So remember to follow us on social media. If you have any questions for us or for Jon, you just use the hashtag #AskTeams, and we'll respond to those. And if we need to reach out to Jon to get a more robust answer, we will also do that. So, Jon, Thank you so much for joining us this week. We have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And I think, like I said, if I don't stop it now, I think we could probably make this like a 3-part series. So we'll let you go for now, but, potentially invite you back for another session of data analytics with Mike.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Yeah. Thanks. And before we log off, make sure to, wherever you're listening, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment. And to Tracy's point, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to engage with you that way. And while you're at it, give us a share with your friends and family, or your coworkers or whoever. But we'd love if you can continue to share the Building Teams with Teams & Co. podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
See ya.
You've been listening to Building Teams with Teams & Co. To learn more about the latest thinking on how to empower your team to deliver exceptional results, or to book a consultation, please visit us at teamsandco.com or follow us at LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook.